Handout 4 is about proportional relationships. So if you can recall from 7th grade, a relationship between two quantities is proportional if the ratio between the two quantities is constant. And ratio just means a fraction. So if I could spell this right. So if you remember, like last year, we did define if it was constant or not. On a table, we would do the y divided by the x. And if every time the y divided by the x was the same, then it was proportional because it had the same constant. And then we had graphs, and two things on a graph, if it's proportional, is the graph will be a straight line. And then the graph will pass through the origin. It has to be both of those things. So, and then I guess I got ahead of myself. Down here in a table, we want to check for equivalent ratios. So in other words, if it's proportional, the ratio of y divided by x will always be constant. And it has to be y divided by x, and you have to check them all. So we're going to try a couple of these. Hillary's looking for a gym to join. One gym offers a membership for $25 a month. Use the info to complete the following. So remember, we can represent this situation by a table and a graph, and then these would be the words. And then we also practiced writing equations last year. So for the table, I'm going to go ahead and have you fill it out. So at 0 months, obviously it would be $0. And the process is just what you do to get the end result. So like in this case, it would be 25 times 0. Okay, so for 1 month, it's going to cost $25. And that was done by doing 25 times 1. 2 months, I want you to make sure that you're not just adding every time. Actually make sure you use that constant. So the constant's 25, so you're doing 25, times 2. And so then that would make it 50. And you should keep going all the way down. The last one would be 100. Okay, you can fill those in. And then if the number of months is X, so we don't know it, it's just any number of months, the process would be the constant times X, and that would get you your Y, whatever your cost is. So what is the slope or rate of change shown in the table? So the slope is your constant. It's also your unit rate. So in this case, it's 25. Is the table proportional? Yes. And you know it is because it has a constant. And then it's not on here, but let's take it a step further and let's write that equation that we practiced last year. So it's y equals, and then 25 is the constant for this one, times whatever your x is. Okay, so then you would go ahead and graph it. And I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to pause it, so you should be graphing it right now. Okay, so I went ahead and used the ordered pairs here, the 1, 25, went over 1, up 25, started with 0, 0, and kept going. And then you can go ahead and draw the line through them. And so, again, what is the slope or rate of change shown in this graph? Well, it should be the same. It should be 25. Is the graph proportional? And remember, you're looking for two things. So yes, it is. And then you need to explain why. It would be a straight line through the origin. So make sure that you do some explaining on that because you will have to for the test. Okay, so we already talked about the equation over here, but when you go on the back to write an equation to represent it, we've already done that on the front side. So that was this y equals 25x. Do you see the slope in the equation? And yes, you do. Whoops. The slope is 25. It is the number in front of the x. And I would write that down so you can look back at that. So what conclusion can you make about proportional equations? So if you remember from last year, they don't have any other numbers. So an example would be like y equals 25x plus 2. That would not be proportional because of the plus 2. So like for the wellness center, you have to pay a membership fee of $75. And then maybe it's $25 a month. So that $75 membership fee would cause it to not be proportional. So if an equation is proportional, you know that it doesn't have any other numbers except y equals whatever x. Okay, so then down here, proportional equations can be written in this form. Y equals, and then slope is represented by m, and then there's your x. And then it tells you where m is the slope, which is also the same as rate of change or unit rate. So you might want to write that down here, unit rate, like per 1. And then what do the x and y represent in the equation? So they represent your ordered pairs. So it just depends on the situation. Like on that last one, it was 1 month, $25, 2 months, $50. So those are your x and y's. So I'm going to go ahead and have you fill out this table now. So you're going to have to figure out the slope or the unit rate here because they don't give it to you per 1. And we'll check that when we get back together.